Hello, welcome back everybody. I'm hoping that everybody has done what I didn't do initially, which was to log on to the new webinar because we had a different appointment in the diary for this afternoon. I think I've got a similar kind of numbers of assessment of IEPAs, so I'm assuming that's what everybody's done. Well done everybody. Just bear with me a second. Let's do on hold. Just bear with me a second, everybody. I'm just going to find the right location of where we left off. Presentation, just a second. Right. Right then. So, I'm assuming, I think we might be a couple of people short.
Just quickly check.
Just going to wait a couple of minutes to give people a chance to get back and log back in. We had some problems logging into our afternoon session, so that could be the case for some other people too. So let's just give them a couple of minutes. Okay, I've just one more check of the attendees. Make sure we've got everybody. I think 11. Jane. Just one more minute and then we'll start. I hate to lose people for the most exciting bit.
Yeah, it's just the people that sessions.
Right. Okay. Let's put that to one side back away and let's do. Okay, so this afternoon we're joined by Libby Tibbs, who used to be in our team, but moving onward and upward, and now she's the super user for EPA Pro within the organisation, and she's going to work with us this afternoon to help us do some walkthrough of some of the processes that we've talked about this morning. In the slide deck, which we'll send to you, we've already made some of the amends that were suggested this morning. When we finish the training today, we'll send you this slide deck. And for the systems part, initially, there are a series of screenshots with explanations and arrows about the different parts of the system and what they mean. We'll do this in live time on the system so you get a chance to see it happening. Once we finish the system training today and we've provided the deck to you, the next job for us to support with rollout is to provide just little bite-sized videos for each of the steps that you as IEPAs and LEPAs will need to take as you move through EPA Pro and as you use the systems. That will be part of the resource pack that we put together. Okay, so starting off with the first slide. I haven't got it in presentation view because it makes it easier to negotiate between the two systems. But initially, and I think it's towards the end of this month, probably the 26th, I think is the date. You as IEPAs potentially using the EPA Pro through the beta phase will be given access. You'll be set up on the system. You'll be given access to EPA Pro. You'll receive an email with a link in it, and that will require you to change your password in the same way you do with Walled Garden. So you'll get the email. The email will be from, it will be from EPA Pro. Yes. It will. So the email will be from EPA Pro. You'll get a prompt to reset your password. Please do that as quickly as you can, and then you can go to the sign in. Your account, and that's how you do that. It's quite simple. It's like a lot of other systems that we use, and that will then give you access to EPA Pro. We spoke a little bit this morning about SharePoint. Now, we're not going to go into more detail about SharePoint today. We will provide the training on SharePoint via a recorded webinar. It's a very simple to use system, but in theory, you should receive the setup and login for SharePoint at a similar timescale to the EPA Pro one, just so you're aware. Right, any questions before we move on? I don't think there would be, but just in case, if anybody's got any burning questions from before lunch? No. Okay, right, at that point then, we'll move on to the next stage. So, Libby, the overview, this is what it looks like for you. As you log in as an IEPA, this is your landing page. Libby, do you want to go into the live system and talk us through what they'll see when they log in?
Okie dokie. So this is ultimately your dashboard, and this is exactly how you will see it. I think it's really important at this stage just to point out that the platform in itself is evolving. We have a lot of changes that come through on a 4-weekly basis, but any impact or changes that do come through to the application that will affect you guys, obviously we'll get that communicated out to you as quickly as possible. So yeah, your main dashboard. So at the top here, just ignore this return to your account, it's just because I'm logged on as a super user. So up here you have a little icon, that's where your notifications will be displayed. Your login name. Down to your left you have your caseload. So you have your await and acceptance. So if you click onto that, these are all the apprentices or your workload that has been allocated to you from the EPA events booking team in Burntwood. And this basically sets a format of work that you need to accept or decline for work. The second one underneath is my caseload, and that is ultimately work in progress that you currently have. Okay. The second column is your gateway review. So again, it's quite self-explanatory. It will give you details of those apprentices that have enrolled, completed, and any apprentices that have gone through Gateway and that are being archived. The third section is under assessment. Now this is where the bulk of your work will be. So here you get to book planning meetings, you get to manage your planning meetings, you get to see the assessment progress of each individual apprentice, and then the bottom one is certification. And last but certainly not least is your support materials within your dashboard. And as you can see, you have EPA pack, recording forms, exemplars, sleep reports, prep tools, and a support area.
Okay, so initially we will provide the support materials on the deck by email, but eventually the idea is that actually the tools that you need to use the system on the system, so you can access those bite-sized links to videos from this point, which means that they're all in one place, which makes it easier to sort of identify the support that you'll need and then get that help. Can I ask you to go back to the Gateway review, Libby? Yes. So click on that. Now, enrolled, completed and archived. Enrolled means those candidates have been enrolled, yes, but they haven't completed their Gateway yet. So that's correct. And if they're in that, they've been allocated and accepted by the IEPA. Yes. Okay, if they're completed, they've been through Gateway. So in theory, they are going through an assessment process. Yes. And archived is that they're no longer relevant to that particular IEPA. That is correct. Okay, so we spoke a little bit this morning about enrolled. In theory, the apprentices are allocated to you once we know they're going through Gateway. But there may be some, because that activity happens in parallel, there may be some that are allocated that haven't quite completed Gateway. Under those circumstances, if there is an issue, the EPA events booking team will contact you and they may ask you to put on hold planning meetings or to postpone them while they tie up a few loose ends from the Gateway application. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Any questions or any hands up, any points? No? Okay, that's fine. Right. Anything else about the landing page?
No, because we'll go through each section.
Oh, got a hand up. Caroline.
Hello. I just want to check with the assessment section. At the end it says certification. What actions do we take for the certification piece?
We'll go through that when we come to it. But in that particular area, that it refers to the final overall result for the EPA. So what the different sections are called and what you have to do, we'll go through more detail as we go through the processes. That's all right, Caroline?
Yes, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Any hands up, any questions? There's one there. Okay, fine. At that point, we will continue. So, to the presentation. So as Libby's just described on the deck, see a screenshot of that sort of landing page and different sections that you will see when you log in as an IEPA. When we do the LEPA training, the interface for the LEPA is very similar. When we do the LEPA training, we'll show you that specifically, but it is very similar to what you see as an IEPA. Libby's spoken through this and talked about a little bit about the notifications, right? And then she spoke a little bit about the different sections and tabs on the left-hand side. Okay, so the next part is where we refer to the part of the process which is about the IEPA receiving a case from the EPA events booking team and either accepting or rejecting. Maybe can you take us through the process?
Yes. So straight away back onto your landing page, you go to caseload. Again, quite self-explanatory, awaiting acceptance. Okay, so here is all the apprentices that have been allocated to you that are awaiting your acceptance or your rejection. So I'm going to pick on apprentice number 27, and first I'm just going to show you how to accept an apprentice for work. Just to go through, it's got the standard training provider details, when gateway was submitted, okay, and it's literally click accept. A prompt will ask you, are you sure you want to accept this apprentice? To which you click OK. And then that will then go into your caseload column just there.
That will track the number of apprentices you're currently dealing with, and there are various stages of progress.
Yeah, which I can show you the progress chart. Okay, so that's how to accept an apprentice. What I'm going to do now is show you how to decline an apprentice. Again, very self-explanatory. So we're going to use apprentice 28. We will go along to the actions column and press reject. And then it's going to ask you a reason for rejection.
Too far. Too far away.
Oh, I was going to put, I have won
the lottery.
The lottery. And we are then just going to go and reject the apprentice. Again, another prompt will ask you, are you really sure you want to reject this apprentice? And there you go. And that will then remove itself from your caseload completely. Okay? Any questions?
No? Okay. So you've accepted some apprentices, you've rejected some apprentices, and currently you've got 9 to respond to. You've got 9 awaiting acceptance. It really is important that if the EPA events booking team have allocated you a number of apprentices, either because they've had a conversation with you or because they have a sense that you've got spare capacity in your caseload, when they appear in your awaiting acceptance, we'd like you to accept or reject them as quickly as possible, because if the answer is reject, then those apprentices need to be reallocated to a different IEPA as soon as possible so we don't slow down the process. Okay, so in your caseload you've got 9. You talked about explaining what the caseload looks like. So in terms of my caseload, if we were to look at that, what information do we find on this page?
So again, so this is my caseload. This is apprentices that you have accepted for work, and it will give you the name, the standard that they have been registered on to for EPA, your name, excuse the frank farm, it was something quick I did last night, The endpoint assessment will have your name, the provider, and the date that they were added to your caseload.
Can you get more information about the apprentice page?
Yes, certainly can. So let's take grey and green. We click on this little profile tab here, and that will give you, I suppose, in a way, a progress chart of where that Graham Green, who's an apprentice, is with his EPA. I've picked a really funny one to pick because I've cancelled it. But let me just go back just to show you a little bit better one. There you go, that was complete. So on this page, you will see that the apprentice has registered, they've gone through Gateway, planning, as in planning meetings and planning the components of the apprenticeship has taken place. The assessment of the components has taken place and they have completed and certificated. You get this nice little, I suppose, with like a status bar at the bottom. At the top here, you've got one that says profile. And that will give you basic information about the apprentice. Just scroll down.
The ENR number is in the, it's the external user ID.
External user ID.
Can you find that? Can you show us where to find that? Because I just want it in the next page. That's not. No worries. Okay, so we've got information about where each of our apprentices are in their journey in terms of their planning meeting, assessment stage, certification, and we have a list of people that we have accepted. Yeah. Right. Okay. Any questions at this point? No? Okay, that's great. Shall we move on then? So, in terms of the next stage, so we talked about receiving a caseload, and Libby's talked you through the accept and reject. Points to remember, just points I wanted to draw your attention to. If you do reject an allocation, you will be asked to enter a reason for that. That is some information that would be useful for us, but that's not that meaningful. If you do confirm, you accept the apprentice and then you later reject, you can reject it on here, but you will need to let the EPA events booking team know and draw their attention to it, because if you've accepted it and then later rejected it, that does add more time to the apprentice scheduling, so it's important like that. Okay, we talked about caseloads, and we've talked about the completion and the status bar, which gives you an idea of where that apprentice is. Right, next stage, the planning meeting. So if you want to go into the system and find out where we can show us how you do this. Remember, the planning meeting was the part of the process that we spoke about this morning. So once an IEPA has been allocated an apprentice and they've accepted it, the next activity is for them to use that planning meeting template, the email, to contact the provider to give them some potential dates for a planning meeting. And the planning meeting is about setting the assessment dates. Once the provider comes back with a potential date for the planning meeting, then the planning meeting can be set up in EPA Pro. Before it is set up, it's important that because the planning meeting takes place remotely, it is the EPA events booking team who will set up the GoToMeeting webinar link. So once you have the date for the planning meeting, contact, as we said this morning, contact the EPA events booking team, and they will then set up the GoToMeeting activity and will provide you with the GoToMeeting. Now, once you have the date of the planning meeting and you have the GoToMeeting link, then you can set up the planning meeting on the EPA Pro system. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, okay, so you go over to your menu to assessment and you'll take the option book planning meeting. Okay. So just an example, I'm going to pick that our planning meeting is going to go ahead for tomorrow.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah, it's a bit quick, isn't it? It's the 21st. And just down here, you'll see like a little timer egg. And then if you just use the up and down columns, you can pick what time. like your EPA planning meeting to go ahead. This column here is your expected duration and it's defaulted for 1 hour. Okay.
I think in terms of the duration of planning meeting, it would really depend on how many apprentices we'll be talking about. But it's fine, we can leave it in for an hour when you set it up on the EPA Pro system.
Okay, so I'm going to click the remote key under type. If it is that you are going to be doing a face-to-face planning meeting, again, you just use the option face-to-face.
As we said this morning, we envisage that all the planning meetings will take place remotely.
Okay, so after you've entered, basically the main details is the date and the time, and you would add your apprentice. So here is a populated search. Here's what I made earlier. So this is my apprentice 30, and I'm going to add her onto the booking, which she will show here. So then you get the option then to add other attendees. So if I click on this link here, this will populate everyone who working with that apprentice, whether it's the training provider, the employer, and yourself. Okay, so for this instance, the training provider is going to be there and the employer is going to be there. What's really important to point out is that you must add yourself to the planning, which I will tick there. Okay, the EPA manager, it's there as a default, and obviously that's the booking team in Burntwood, which would not be there. Okay, and then you will see then the bottom here. So you've got your apprentice, your training provider, your employer, and your endpoint assessor. Now, should there an instance be that the apprentice has requested to have an external attendee join, whether it's family, I'm not sure who it would be, you would add a guest. And in that, all you would need to do is add the first name, last name, and email address, and select the option Add. And they would also then show at the bottom of this attendance list.
We spoke a little bit this morning about other attendees at the assessments, and I think in the vast majority of cases it is just the apprentice, but that is given there as an option.
Is there as an option?
As extra flexibility.
So you've got your attendees in place. What you need to do then is just tick the confirmed option. It will go green to say that they have confirmed their attendance, like so. And then you press the URL. Oh, quick. You just need to put the URL in.
Now, what you're typing in here is that when the events booking team in Burntwood set up a GoToMeeting link for you, they will send you a link to access that, and you just copy it and paste it into this field. That just confirms in the notification to the provider what the link is. They will get the link through GoToMeeting webinar anyway, but it is, as the system currently stands, that's how it has to work.
Okay, so just to go back, we've got the date, the time, we've got the link for the GoToWebinar, you've got your attendees, and you tick to say that they're confirmed. Once you've got all that information, you press save. And that has confirmed. At the top, it will say assessment meeting created successfully.
I'm going to pause there because we've got a question. Do you want to keep it? We've got a question. What is the remote URL? You actually preempted us. The remote URL is the GoToMeeting link that the EPA events booking team will set up for you and will provide to you. Are there any other questions? There's another question there. Can you edit this section later if waiting? Elizabeth, I think you can edit it later. I think you have to put something in there, Libby.
You have to put something in that tool just for it to confirm the assessment planning.
But I'm presuming that you could put a placeholder in there, like GoToMeeting link.
Yeah.
You could put something simple in there, like GoToMeeting link, TBC, in that section, just so you're able to proceed, Liz. That will then stop you from waiting for the EPA events booking team. And remember, because they're organising that planning meeting through GoToMeeting, the participants will also get a notification and the detail and the link through that system too. So that doesn't worry me too much if you need something in there to proceed. Okay, any other questions or any hands raised? Okay, good. Right. So if at this point, we have a meeting in the diary. One thing I think is really important to underline is currently how the system works. Even if you have a planning meeting that happens through GoToMeeting with a number of different apprentices. So you're going to be talking about assessments for a number of different apprentices. On the system, you will have to set up an actual planning meeting for each each apprentice that for whom you'll be scheduling the dates. That's really important to underline. So we talked about this morning, you may be allocated one apprentice. And in your planning meeting, you'll be discussing the assessment date for that one apprentice. You set up one planning meeting on EPA Pro with the dates, and you proceed that way. If you are discussing 3 apprentices at that planning meeting at the remote event, you will need to set up and to put in EPA Pro a planning date for each of those apprentices. That's how it currently stands. Now, what Libby spoke about at the beginning of the session is that the system is evolving, and there are plans to look at that imminently, but initially you'll be expected to set up on the system a planning meeting event for each of the apprentices, even if you're discussing their assessment dates in one actual meeting. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions or any points to raise at this stage? Okay. Good. I'm going to take that as a good sign. So that's our. Can you go back to the main screen and show me? Let's go back to our landing page as my EPA. So if I wanted to go back to that apprentice, how would I find out about that planning meeting date?
Okay, so under the assessment tab, you would go to assessment progress. What's really important, and it's something that we highlighted I think last week, this little tab in here will automatically default to in progress. You tick onto it and put filter by status, it will list all your apprentices. Unfortunately, it's something we're working with the developers on at the moment to make sure that default comes off. So here's my apprentice 30, who
Good remember his name.
We're going to use this one underneath here because this one's already passed. This one here.
So there's 2 apprentices.
There's 2 apprentices, which can add confusion. So under here, if you just see the little drop down, it will give you a breakdown of the component. You didn't ask for this, did you?
I did. That's fine. So what I said is that for that particular apprentice 30, we booked a planning meeting. If I come into my landing page and I want to go back to that planning meeting date, how do I do that?
Ah, right. My apologies. Sorry, I've gone one step too far. Okay, so let's go back to the landing page. You've got different ways you can do it. You can search at the top here for user. Here. Which is just here. Unfortunately, that function isn't working. So we go to my caseload. Okay, and you would come down. You can search up here. Right. So again, you don't need to put the whole name in. You could just put a section in. Okay. And we would click on here. There you go.
And it shows me that my planning meeting is scheduled the 21st of the 1st.
Yeah,
which is great. And it shows me that it's back into the profile, and as we progress that apprentice 30, we need to work on his name, I think. Apprentice 30, that's the action we've just submitted. Now let's assume we have a planning meeting in the diary. It's for the 21st of January, but I've been contacted by quite an unreliable person to say, oh, we can't make it. We need to change the date of that planning meeting. We're hoping this doesn't happen very often, but if we did need to change the date of the planning meeting, how would we do that?
Okay, again, so to your assessment, and you would manage your planning meeting. And down here is a list of all your apprentices, and as you see, they've got a status bar, so you'll see ones that say scheduled, cancelled, in progress, and completed. Again, you've got your search function. I'm just going to make sure it's working. There it is. And what we want to do is edit the meeting for this apprentice. There is, as we did previously, your assessment planning meeting. Now, if it is that meeting has to be rescheduled for whatever reason, you can do it on this page, on this section here, where it's got reschedule or cancel reason. So we will do it that the apprentice cannot attend. You do again have to put a reason. I'll put the on in there. Now, say for argument's sake, they want to reschedule for the week after. It's not a problem. You would go over to your date scheduled, click onto it, and put it for the week after. Dependent on time as well may change. So all you are changing is the time for the new planning meeting to go ahead of time, that the apprentice could not attend for a very brief reason, or whatever that is.
It's also important to remember that if you do reschedule a planning meeting on EPA Pro, because for one reason or another, you will also need to let the EPA events booking team know to reschedule that webinar on GoToMeeting. And then you don't need necessarily to update the link here, but they will need to update the link in GoToMeeting, so please don't forget to do that. And you can see here, there's the question you raised. You could, in theory, amend that link there with the right link once you get it. Maybe.
Yeah, that's correct. But just to go back, we're going to change the date and time if needed. We're going to click the option, cannot attend, EPA cannot attend, provider cannot attend, and just a very brief description. And then you would come down and just press reschedule. It will prompt you, are you sure you want to reschedule the meeting? You press confirm, and there you go. Again, at the top, it will say assessment meeting has been rescheduled. So you're getting the prompts to let you know what actions have taken place.
Great, thank you. And then as a result of that, the attendees of the meeting, already confirmed, would receive a notification of the change to the assessment.
Yes, that's
planning meeting date. Brilliant. Okay. Should we pause there? Any questions or any points, any queries at this point? We've got a hand up. Do you want to drive? Yes. Press on the. Liz Henderson. Liz, hi. Did you have a question, Jake?
Yeah, you've got on this form it says EPA cannot attend, and it's called EPA further down as well. I mean, we refer to our IEPAs as IEPAs to distinguish them from the endpoint assessment
We do.
event.
We do indeed. It's a very.
I mean, that's.
Unfortunately, currently on the system, there's and not very helpfully actually, because we call them, as you rightly say, endpoint assessment. Currently on the system, an EPA is referred to by the system. It means the same as our IEPA, and that's a good point that we need to put in our sort of glossary of terms. We can't change that currently, but that's not to say we couldn't look at that going forward. But absolutely, you're right to point that out.
Thank you.
Right. We've got another one there. Thanks, Liz. Caroline.
Hello. At the moment, we receive confirmation of an independent endpoint assessment that's going to take place. And on that information, we have a point of contact on the day. I use some of that information to help fill in the health and safety form. Right. What will be happening to that?
Well, That's a very good point. We've got some work to do with the EPA events booking team about there's a lot of information. When the customer puts information into EPA Pro, they put a lot of that information into the system. We just need to be sure that the information they're putting in is the information that you need. So it'll be, the information you get will be in one of two areas. It'll either be on the system, and we will explain how to access that on the system, or it will be in additional information in the short term that the EPA events booking team will provide to you. So when they allocate, they'll allocate through the system, but initially they may need to provide some initial additional information too, but we need to confirm that. So can you just bear with us in that respect? Just as a point of contact on the day, and that information is used for the health and safety form. So let's clarify that, whether that will be for you on the system or it will be something additional. I can't answer that now, but I will do. Is that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Brilliant. Anything else from anybody? Any other questions or points? Great. Okay. That's great. So we shall. Oh, there's one question. Hang on a second. Will bookings of the system be the same as for other EPAs? Please. Actually, will bookings for this system be on the same as for other EPAs? I'm not sure I understand the question. That's probably me being a bit dense. I'm sorry. I'm going to bring you in, Louise, if that's all right. Hi, Louise.
Hi. Sorry, I probably didn't explain myself very well on that question. What I meant was, will the IEPAs have two different systems for knowing that EPAs are coming across to them, or for letting the EPA team know about their availability, or will it work the same as it does now?
In terms of the, it's a good question, Louise. It's a little bit noisy. Just bear with me a second. In terms of the EPA bookings, we'd still, EPA, let's try again. In terms of the IEPA availability, we'd still like you to keep your availability up to date for the time being, because we'll be running dual systems. Some of you will be doing endpoint assessments on EPA Pro as well as the current system on Learning Assistant. It's important that you continue to keep your availability up to date. And there will be a period where, yes, you do, if you are working across two systems, you will have bookings on, the current mechanism that we currently use, and also on EPA Pro. That's why while we're running it dual, we've made it quite small scale, this beta, because we need to assess and learn lots of lessons. But it is challenging to have to work across dual systems, which is why we haven't rolled it out sort of wide scale yet. Lots for us to learn yet. So in answer to your question, yes, there will be a kind of dual running for a period of time until we move forward and we decide to move all of the standard over to EPA Pro. And the timescales for that are yet to be determined, because it really depends on how we move through beta. Does that answer your question, Louise? If it doesn't, please feel free to put your hand up and come back in. Yes. Any other questions? Yes, thank you. Okay. Great. All right. I will, at that point, we can move on. So, moving back to the presentation. We talked about planning meeting. Move through the slides. Libby talked you through booking the planning meeting. We talked about the planning meeting taking place only remotely, as we spoke about this morning. We don't envisage a situation where planning to take place face to face. We wanted to do both, so you're selecting the remote option. Libby spoke about needing to add the apprentice as an attendee. Now, the system requires us to do that, but as we discussed this morning, that's not to say the apprentice will be at the planning meeting. It's really up to the provider to have that conversation and decide how that best works for them within their own system. As somebody pointed out this morning, if the apprentice is from different employers, they might not want them to be in the same meeting together. If there's a lot of them, that might not work either. It's difficult to schedule. So there's lots of reasons why the apprentice may not be there. But as the system currently stands, you have to add them as an attendee. Okay. And there is the reference to the point that Libby made about filters. When you are searching different activities, be careful what filters are on, because that can be misleading. Okay, so we talked through how to book the date, the planning meeting date, the attendees, and then to confirm that. And then we also talked about rescheduling a planning meeting, and where you do reschedule a planning meeting, to be sure that you also let the EPA team know that the schedule of the go-to meeting would also need to be changed. Okay. So at this point, we come to the next stage, and this is where we move into the purpose of the planning meeting, which is to schedule the assessment activities. So for business admin, we've spoken about an evolve test, an interview based on the portfolio, and a project presentation based on the project. Both the project presentation and also the interview are based on materials that are submitted 10 working days before the assessments, as we clarified this morning. So just coming back now to what we spoke about this morning. This is the planning meeting recording form that we're going to rename it. Thank you, Tracy. Which is where, during the planning meeting, the IEPA has made a note of the different assessment methods, has added the times that were agreed for those assessment methods and that meet the different criteria in terms of sequencing, the apprentices, the apprentice information. Now, the apprentice information is already on the system, so I'm not so worried about that. And it's also the IEPA has also highlighted the deadline for submission of evidence dates as well, and highlighted whether a go-to meeting link is required. Now, this meeting form, what we'd like to do is to use this also to request go-to meetings to be set up. So this is the form that the IEPA's completed in their planning meeting, and what we'd like them to do now is to use this information to do the next thing, which is to schedule an assessment activity in EPA Pro. So I'm going to hand over to Libby, our expert, our resident expert.
Okay, so back to your dashboard, and using the assessment menu, we are going to manage our planning meeting.
I've got a hand up in a minute. Just go. Okay, I've got a hand up. Let me click on the hand and see who it is. Tracy. Click on the mute. Hi, Tracy. You got your hand up, lovely.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that if we're starting as we go on, can we make sure that we put the full dates into any of the documentation? So not just put 20, make sure that it's fully 04, 03, 2020.
Okay.
Because I know that I've seen a few times people saying about legal implications that dates can be changed if you just put 20 in, things like that.
Okay. Thanks, Tracy.
Okay.
Sorry, Libby's just getting you off.
Sorry, Tracy.
No, you don't mind.
Okie dokie. So we are looking at then planning meeting. So as you saw earlier, we had to reschedule apprentice 30s. And we are now going, sorry, this one here, create plan. Okay. So pretty much straightforward. If you click on the assessment plan details, it will give you the name, start date, review date, end date, the standard and specialism. I'm not actually sure of what that is, if I'm completely honest. So here you'll have your calendar. So you can click from February to March, back again. Down to this side here, you will have the components that make up the apprenticeship.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you. On the screen, you can see there are 3 components. They are not necessarily, they're not relevant to business admin, because the components for business admin are, as we've established this morning, are 3 components: the evolve test, the interview, and the project presentation. But this is an example. So for each of these, for your particular standard, you will see the components, the assessment methods that are relevant to your standard. And they will be already built into the system. And any associated timescales for uploading evidence will also be attached to those. So as you're scheduling, for example, your project presentation, already built into the EPA Pro system will be the requirement that the evidence has to be uploaded 10 working days before. Just wanted to flag that based on the conversation that we had this morning. Sorry, Libby, I interrupted.
No, it's fine. Yeah, so this is a test site that we use. So yeah, the data and some of it isn't exactly as it should be, but it's just for literally for demonstration purpose only. So you have your date set up and you've got like a showcase portfolio, and you know the date that has been planned for will go the 29th of January. And it's literally with your mouse or cursor, you click on the component and you drag and you drop. Now, if you've dropped it into the wrong date or for whatever reason, you can change it on here. So for argument's sake, I meant to put it on the 28th. Let's change that. Again, this little time cursor thing here, you can change the time. This will be 11 o'clock. Okay. The days and hours and minutes again are just set by default, so there'd be no reason to change that. Your location type, this will say we'll do online because it's showcase portfolio. So all we've added is the date, the time, and the location type. And you go to next. As you see at the top, there are 4 sections that will need to be completed on this assessment component. On this one, it's just clarifying that it's a portfolio of evidence review and the description. Go to next. Here will be defaulted where it will actually have the details set up for you. It will tell you the provider name, provider email address, and the employee details as well. Click next. And then this is your availability. So what you would do is scroll down to find your own name. In this instance, our IEPA is Frank Farmer. Click on Frank yourself, and then it would give you your availability and your plan for that week when you're available.
And that's the availability in terms of the EPA Pro system?
Yes, it is just Pro. Once you have completed that, if you save an email, you will see then that the component has gone green, and that means that has been processed. Same process will go through exactly the same for each of the components. So if we do practical observation, put that one there. Again, exactly the process. We click on the date, we'll keep the date, just change the time. Do that for quarter past. Show you. Days and hours the same. We will do this as a physical, and then it will ask you for the location of assessment, which is where you will be going face-to-face to information. So you could put, for argument's sake, just literally the address, 1 Ascot Road.
And we spoke about this morning, the planning meeting, the planning meeting documentation that you collect during that planning meeting will give you the opportunity to confirm the location of these assessments as well, if they are on site. I know that's not relevant for business admin, where they are, we put that in. For all the business admin standards, it will be remote.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So it'll just show you the options that you do have. So yeah, so the date, the time is set. We've just changed it to physical and pop the address in. Go to next. Again, same process. You will just break it down the description. Go to next. Who's attending? Go to next. And again, you just find yourself, Frank Farmer. Again, still availability chart will come up, and save an email. And the practical observation has gone green. And last but not least, we'll do professional discussion, and we're going to do that in February. Then click, drag and drop. I will just change the time of this one, 10 o'clock. Again, days and hours of day, location, online. Next, overview. employer and provider details, and again, find yourself, and that's it. That has confirmed your planning meeting.
It's really great. Just to highlight, as I've said, a business admin already built into the system, you'd have the components that are relevant to your standard. What you'd have here is an evolve test, a project presentation, and you'd also have the interview here, maybe the components. Now, we spoke this morning that even if it's the responsibility of the customer to book an evolve test on Walled Garden, you will still need to schedule the evolve test in EPA Pro. And the reason for that, as I said this morning, is it creates a space in EPA Pro for us to be able to put the results. So all you would do, in the same way that Libby's just explained, is to pick up that component and to drop it into the place that the customer flags as being the date that they want to do that evolve test. Okay, we've got a question, so let's have a look. This one looks fairly intuitive. However, is there someone available to check and support with the first one? It's a really good question, Louise. And I absolutely feel your pain because you're right, it is new, and I think it's really important. When you see it, it does feel very, I mean, I've used it, Libby's used it. It feels very intuitive and very self-explanatory. Even if you weren't 100% sure, you could click through it. However, there will be support. There'll be support in terms of what to do and what things, how to proceed through something. The EPA events booking team will be monitoring how the event goes through the process, so they will be supporting throughout. And then we also have, if there are any issues with the system, so if something's not working in the way you would expect it to, we've also got Libby, who's our super user, to support with that. But first line support in terms of the system is the events booking team. Will also be using this daily and will be monitoring the progress of their apprentices system. So it's a very good question. As well as the training today, we recognise that you will also need some guidance. That's why we've put so much information into the deck. But we've also, as we said at the beginning, we envisage that we'll have a series of bite-sized videos that will be, a matter of tens of seconds rather than hours and hours of input, tens of seconds. So if you want to know how to book a planning meeting, there'll be a bite-sized video you can click on, and that will give you the insight you need to be able to do that activity. Absolutely. And I think when you don't use something very often, especially the first time, it can be a little bit daunting. Right, a couple of other points I wanted to check with you. As you can see from the screens that Libby showed you, it does give you a view of your availability in EPA Pro. When you book these meetings in, it will show you what else you're doing that week, which gives you good insight in terms of EPA Pro. However, it won't give you insight into the rest of your diary. So if you're doing any other endpoint assessments with the current system, you will need to make sure that when you accept an allocation in EPA Pro, you've actually got space for it. Because, as we said, one of the complications of running a dual system is that you have to check in two places, and that's a bit complicated initially. Just wanted to flag attention to that. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the presentation in a minute. So we spoke through scheduling and assessment activity. We talked about the information from this recording form being used to do that. We spoke about how to schedule, how to make a booking and how to schedule that event in EPA Pro. Just to draw your attention to that point, even if it's the provider who's responsible for booking an assessment on Walled Garden for Evolve, it's important that the date of that assessment is also placed in EPA Pro, and for your standard, it'll be one of the component assessments that you need to schedule, which we just spoke. So Libby spoke how to drop in the components and schedule them in the diary. There's the screenshots there. The next thing is really is a continuation of this, really, where you've got an assessment date in the diary, you've scheduled it through the planning meeting, and something happens. Now again, we are putting a lot of focus onto the customer. Once the assessment dates are set, everything needs to be done to meet the assessment dates that have been set. But if they do need you to reschedule, then that can also be done through EPA Pro, and it can be done through an email or a conversation with the provider to do that. Can you talk us through that, Libby, in terms of the system?
Okay, so we'll use this particular one that we've just dealt with, and we're going to look at should an assessment component which has been planned needs to change or for whatever reason. So let's go to one here. Okay. So for this instance, should we say, we would go to the one that we. Okay, so if you hover over any appointment, it will give you the apprentice details and the current time you have that planned for that day. What I'm going to do is double click, and again, what you've put in previously, it will bring it straight back up. So again, if it is that you need to reschedule the date for whatever reason, you will click onto date scheduled, and you would just pick your new date and new time. Again, as this is online, the GoToMeeting would have to change as well. Again, you would just literally go to the next button, gives you the overview, exactly the same as it is when you set it up. Next again, you've already been selected, go, and you would save an email. And then that has actually then changed over the correct date. Do another one. Shall we again? Yeah,
Why
over
not?
here. Yeah, okay.
How do I identify which apprentice it is from the diary?
Okay, good point. Yeah, so you can hover over your date. It will tell you there you've got the apprentice. It won't say apprentice 30. It will actually say their name. But another way of actually finding that, if you go to the assessment progress, just here, like I said, it will default to in progress, and that will literally just show you your apprentices that are currently in progress within EPA Pro. If you go filter by status, it just gives you everything. Okay. Now look, we've even got 3 apprentice 30 there for confusion. So we're going to pick this one.
Number 30, Libby.
We really need to use names. Okay, so we're just going to use the click here. And again, it's another way which we'll look at this afterwards. What I have just realised is go to your assessment plan's not showing. So again, this is what's really good with these run-throughs. If there's any technical pictures that highlight, I can pick up these straight away. Maybe.
Important to bear in mind that this is a QA site. This is not an actual site, so we will get some technical pictures.
We certainly only did actually start working about 5:30 today as well. Okay, so let's go to this way instead. So So again,
so where did you click to start?
Sorry, my mistake. So manage planning meetings, which is just here on your left. Okay. So we've got Frank Farmer, which is the IEPA name, which your name will be. The apprentice 30. The employers simply fish cakes. I've not made these out, I promise you. And the providers hadn't. So we're going to view the plan. And there is your plan. And that is specific for that apprentice. So everything else will be highlighted out. These are for other events you've got going on.
Okay.
These blue ones are just for that apprentice.
Well, I think that's fine. You could use the view that you initially showed us, but if there's lots of dates in there, I'd be clearer to go directly to the apprentice.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll pause now. Any questions or any points that anybody wants to flag? Oh, we've got a hand. Caroline. Hi, Caroline.
Did it synchronise this diary with one of your own diaries?
Unfortunately, not at the minute, and that is a good point. As I said to you, the thing about running dual systems is that you have to kind of keep your eye on 2 different things. What you can do is you can use this diary in EPA Pro to give you an idea of your EPA Pro availability, but I think it makes good sense to also update if you're using your Outlook diary as your main focus for the activity that you're doing, because that's how you manage your life, then you should really update the dates in that one as well. That would make it easy, especially through beta and as we're running dual systems. It's a good point. Is that okay, Caroline?
Yes, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from anybody? Okay, so I think it would be a useful moment just to take 5 minutes. So we've been breaking every hour. I think that's quite useful. So let's just break until about just after 25 to 3. Just take 5 minutes to come for break, and we will reconvene then. Okay, welcome back everybody. I'm just going to share my screen again. Right. Okay, so we've just spoken about rescheduling assessment dates. Remember the point that we raised this morning, that that things do come up. We do place expectation on the customer that if they do set dates, that everything should be made done possible to make those dates, but sometimes things need to be rescheduled. If so, customers may contact you to reschedule dates. If there are ongoing issues with customers rescheduling dates and you feel that this is happening too much and it's causing problems more than necessary, then this is a case of escalating this to the EPA events booking team, and they will take this up with the customer. And this talks very much to the point that Sylvia raised this morning, which is, because you have more direct contact with the provider in this model, it's really important that where there are issues to highlight that to the City and Guilds team so they can pick those conversations up with the customer and head off any particular issues. Just wanted to flag that point with you. Okay, so as we move through, we've spoken a little bit about rescheduling, and Libby talked you through that process of how to do that. So now we're going to move on to the part which is about the assessment, actually. Everything else was about the bit before, but this is about assessing a component. So we spoke this morning about there being different types of material for you to assess. There will be the evidence that is uploaded onto the EPA Pro platform that is provided by the estimate provider, which could be a portfolio, it could be a project. There's also the evidence that you as IEPAs create from your assessor forms, whether you're observing or conducting an interview. And currently those assessments will be stored in 2 different places. But let's get Libby to talk us through how it works on EPA Pro, and we can start to illustrate that.
Okay, so I'll just take you back down to, if you just click on the City and Guilds 9M logos up here, it'll refresh your page as well. Okay, so what we are looking at is the assessment section. So if you think about this assessment tab there, that's where all your working is going to be under. The caseload is the review, and then the assessment is the actual working. So what we're going to look at is assessment progress. Again, if you look at the filtering at the top, if you just make sure that it's filtered by status. So apprentice 10, really look at names. You can see here, just as an example, the bar has gone all green. I'll just click on that just to show you. You will see that in fact this apprentice has actually completed their endpoint assessment. Again, please don't take much attention to the assessment components. This is just a test site as such. So for argument's sake, their showcase portfolio, they passed. The practical observation, they got a distinction, and then professional discussion, they got the distinction. So within EPA Pro, this is telling you that that apprentice has now been completed, so that is why they are green. Okay, so if we look at apprentice 23, you can see they've got like a nice amber colour just here. Okay, so again, your component breakdowns are just here, and the status is stating that you are pending result. This means in EPA Pro that the IEPA yourselves have yet to process the results. So we're just going to quickly go through on how would you put up the workload from the provider or apprentice and how to assess that. Okay, so here we're going to go showcase portfolio, and we're going to edit the assessment info. No, we're not. Just give me 2 seconds. Just bear with us, callers.
We're looking to, so Libby set up some information in this site before we did the training, and one of the assessments would have shown that there was a document attached to it, so we're just trying to find the right one. Okay, let's suggest that we do it this way. Okay, so there are three components, and we are looking to assess one of the components. It's fine because let's just walk through it. Start with the showcase portfolio. So we're looking to go back.
Yes, basically what should happen where these ones have completed, you've got view assessment info. That is what ideally should be here.
Okay, so we've got an apprentice 23 has got three components. If you click on the action edit assessment information, and that is for you to edit.
There it is.
Or do you want to break the minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, can I make a decision? I think instead of you watching, Libby click through a number of screens. I don't think that's helpful because it looks a lot more complicated and daunting than it needs to be. So what I'm going to suggest is that we take a pause for another 15 minutes until 3 o'clock. We don't have an awful lot more to work through anyway. That'll give Libby the chance to make sure that the information is where it should be. And then we can go through what you need to do when you enter results, and we can simplify that process. So I'm going to propose that we stop for another 15 minutes until 3 o'clock, and then we come back together. So apologies for that, but I think that's probably more productive than showing you too much and scaring you, because you'll never have to do these things. So I'm just going to answer that question. I've got one question before we go. From Megan, is the status bar green if all three assessments and overall assessment is complete, or just the three assessments?
The overall.
So that status bar will be green if overall result goes out. Brilliant. Okay, we'll come back to that when we get a chance to go through it. So I'm going to adjourn. I'm going to put the webinar on pause, and we'll come back at 3 o'clock. Right, good morning, sorry, good afternoon again, good morning. I feel like I'm in a time warp. I'm sorry about that. I just felt that it was necessary to pause while we got our heads around why the system wasn't showing what it needed to show. And instead of kind of taking you through that, we've done that offline. So thank you for your patience. So we haven't got very much more to work through. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to make the QA system work in the way that we know it should. So in terms of the guidance and in terms of the deck, it will be updated with the right information, but we're going to try and talk you through it as best you can, even if we can't show you how it should be. And we can explain to you step by step of what you should see. So to remind you of where you are, you've had your planning meeting, you've put your component dates in for the 3 components, and you are now at a stage where you've assessed each of those components and you're going to put results in those components. We start off by what you would do is you would enter into that particular apprentice, and you would be able to see that if it is a component assessment, it's for example a showcase portfolio or for example an interview, you would be able to see that the customer has uploaded evidence to go with that. Now, what we'll show you now is what that will look like when you enter that apprentice. Can you talk us through that, Libby? So from the landing page.
I will do. So we are back, refreshed on our landing page. We will go through assessment and assessment progress, making sure that that in progress filter has changed to filter by status. Okay, so I'm going to show you what the dashboard will look like. So here again, you've got your components 1, 2 and 3. Now we know that this apprentice has completed their EPA because they're agreed and their results are here. But what I wanted to show you is underneath the action, underneath your apprentice that you'll be working on, it will state view assessment information or info. Okay, so view assessment info. This is our line as such, apprentice number 23, who hasn't completed their EPA because they are amber. What the action should say, instead of edit assessment info, it should actually state view assessment info.
And you click on that view assessment information, and that will show you any evidence that's been uploaded by the customer. That's that assessment. So as Lily's just clicked on the screen, it shows you that there is an attachment. And you just click by view the attachment, and it will open the document for you. And this is a test document, so if you received that, you wouldn't be giving a very high grade. But it is a test document, but it shows you how it will open up on your computer, and that will give you access to any materials that the customer's uploaded in advance of the assessment. Now, we haven't been able to show you that specifically with Apprentice 23 today because it's not behaving itself, but we just wanted to show you that it is a simple action to open a piece of evidence that's been uploaded. So if we go back to Apprentice 23, and this is the one that we're currently working on, they haven't had a result yet, but let's assume that you have viewed the assessment information that's relevant and you've assessed it, and you'd now like to add a result.
Okay, so again, you would just go to add results, click that, and you get the screen above. So you would automatically populate the date and time that was planned in from your planning meeting.
That's pulled from your planning meeting.
That is pulled from your planning meeting, yeah. And then this section here that states outcome, it's a drop down and it gives you the options whether or not it's distinction, pass, fail, absent or disqualified. And those options are in the build of the data that's put into the system by City and Guilds. Now, we spoke about the different options, so you should see the options that are relevant to your standard and the component that we're speaking about. And also, as you can see on there is an absent option. Now, we spoke about where there is an assessment date that is scheduled, and if it is, for example, a project presentation and the learner doesn't turn up for that, then the result that we're putting in there is absent. Okay. But you can select any of those. Yeah. Do you want to select one? I will select pass because I'm in that kind of mood, yes. Okay, so it states here this will mark the component as successful, which is great. Upload file and name, you will leave. So all you are actually doing is the outcome as a pass on this section.
It gives you the option to upload a file because for fails, we do upload fail feedback at this point. But as it's a pass, we don't
need to. So we're going to use the next option. At the top, you will see again, you get these little tabs at the top, so it gives you like your next actions for you to complete this assessment component.
And now the feedback fields here, in theory, it's possible for the IEPA at this point to put feedback for the apprentice. Now we're not going to be using because currently we don't give feedback for every component, we give fail feedback. So just leave that blank for the time being.
As this was a pass, there's no action required, but I will do a fail afterwards just to show you, the drop down. Not going to let me show you purely because I put this as a pass, but I will go over the next one as a fail. So press next. Your signature will automatically be in the system, so you don't have to mess about the declarations and sign everything. Press submit, and voila. The status now has gone to pending QA.
And pending QA means it's gone to the EPA quality show, which we'll talk about. Should we do the others?
Yeah, do you want me just to point out though, if it is that you were having probably a Libby day, usually on a Monday morning, and you realise, oh, I've got the wrong result in, at this stage you can change the results because it has not gone through to the EPA to be QA'd. So you go to edit results and just literally select the outcome that you should have chosen. You want to give a distinction in the other, really nice, okay. Again, you will have to go through the same process here for it to save, submit. Okay, so that's now changed to pending QA. As I say, that will then show with your EPA. So for the practical observation, we're going to, as we would, it would say view assessment information. You would click on view and you'd be able to see evidence being uploaded. So we're quite happy with it. We're going to add the results. Okay, so again, this information has automatically been extracted from your assessment planning meeting. But I'm feeling a bit mean, so I'm going to put this one as a fail. And it will give you obviously the note that this will mark the component as a fail. At this point then, you would upload your failed feedback form, am I correct at school?
As we spoke about this morning, because the results are released by components, the failed feedback would also be by components. Now, we spoke about a SharePoint containing all of the assessment documentation. So the failed feedback would need to be put into SharePoint too, but we want to use EPA Pro to test this out. So we'd like you, if there is failed feedback, we'd like you to add it to the system at this point. So can you show us how to do that?
I can indeed. So choose file. And again, it's just uploading wherever you would keep your failed feedback form. This is on desktop. Upload name and failed feedback form. Then I would upload. And then you would see it just underneath that it's uploaded, failed feedback form. You can view it again or delete it if it's the wrong one that you've uploaded. For the wrong apprentice.
Or actually, at a certain point, if you do receive feedback from your EPA on that failed feedback form that needs to be amended, you can delete that copy and replace it.
Okay, so continue as normal. Next. Feedback, apprentice feedback, EPA feedback, and next steps.
Again, we're asking you not to complete that because we do the feedback through a feedback form, so disregard that on the system.
This is where it will ask you to select the next action. So whether or not on this component, if it's a retake, back into learning, or failed.
Okay, so what we would suggest, what we recommend at this point is because the learner has failed, they need to do a retake. So as the IEPA, you would select retake at this point. At the earliest date for retake could be tomorrow. So it's a case of just putting the earliest date in at that point. Be very, very explicit. Yeah.
Okay, so you've marked it as next action for a retake and your date and time. Again, it's automatically put on there your signature and you submit.
Okay, well, we're going to do the next. There's a question there, Libby. Let's just take a question first. Oh, we've got quite a couple of questions. Right. So Megan's, that's the first one. We've answered that one, Megan. Is the feedback box left empty going forward or just for the purposes of demonstration? Liz, I think we need to assess how that feedback box can be used. Currently, we use a fail feedback form. And it could be that we decide, instead of using a fail feedback form, that we use those boxes instead. But I think we need further testing to understand, you know, where those boxes go, how they're received at the customer. So for the time being, I'd like us to leave those boxes empty and to just use the fail feedback form that we're comfortable and familiar with for the first stages of beta. Hopefully that answers your question. If you've got any additional points, please feel free to raise your hand. Okay. Well, should we do the last one?
This is the last one. Okay, so it would say view assessment info and results. Again, what do you want to pass?
Should we pass it?
Let's pass it.
I feel like we're doing a radio show.
Okay, this will mark the component as successful. Okay. Nothing needed required in that section. Nothing required in that section. The signatures are already defaulted in section 4, and there you go. And you'll see then the status has changed to pending QA, and pending QA. What's really important to highlight as well, and you know, we find things out as we're going along with this platform at the moment, but because you have a component that has failed, this will go, once it has been QA'd by your LEPA, the LEPA agrees with the 2 components that have passed, but 1 is a fail. You will get this bar that's green to about 3/4 of the way, and the remaining bit here will stay amber. So it's a really good indicator to know that, you know, you've got potential work coming through for that apprentice at some point.
That's really helpful. Can we pause? Any questions or hands up at this point? Anybody wants to make any points? Query anything? No. Good. Okay, so at that point, I just want to go back to the presentation a minute to see where we're up to. Okay, so we've spoken about the fail feedback form, and we've spoken about inputting the results. All of this information is on the deck that we'll send you. Just to remind you, as I've said, that fail feedback form for beta, we are asking the IEPAs to put the results and the fail feedback form on EPA Pro. We would also like that fail feedback form to go on SharePoint, because SharePoint will be our single source of information. We just want to put the fail feedback form on EPA Pro because we want to try out those processes as well. So please bear with us. Slightly onerous, but I think that's the right thing to do. Okay, so at this point, before we schedule a retake, what would be useful, I think, is if we look at this now from the perspective. So those 3 results have been given an outcome, and I'd like to QA them, and when necessary, release them. That's fine. So we're going into the system as a LEPA. Yeah, and they're called EPAs.
You don't have to worry about these screens. This is just me fitting across all different.
As a LEPA, you would just log in as a LEPA and come to the screen.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see that the LEPA dashboard pretty much mirrors the IEPA dashboard. Okay, so everything is LEPA, yeah. Assessment. QA, sorry. Hey. Okay, so under the assessment tab, what you will find that's different from an IEPA point of view, from an IEPA's dashboard, to a LEPA dashboard, is that they have this little nice QA tab there. And again, that's suppose for a LEPA, that's your workload that you can see here that Frank Farmer, your IEPA, has got one item for QA, and Alexandra the Great has got one in for QA. So the LEPA will click on here, and it will say the EPA is not found, not what it should do. Just give you two. Click on that one, see if that.
So we're having a few technical issues, so please bear with us. Okay, so at that point, we'll leave. I've got a question. My question. Why isn't this working? I'm a LEPA and IEPA. Will it be a combined dashboard? Yes.
You will, yeah. So what will happen is conditions behind it. You will have access as an IEPA and LEPA just as one login.
And then Lorraine's question: if a LEPA also carries out even IEPA, will they have two separate logins? No, they won't have two separate logins. But a LEPA can't QA any assessments that they are doing, which for obvious reasons. Okay, so that's the two questions there. Okay, so I think at that point, what would be useful is we'll go back a step, Libby. So we talked about an assessment that has failed. Now, if an assessment has failed, we've spoken about adding the fail feedback form. If, however, an assessment has failed, the next job is to reschedule that assessment. And this morning, if you remember, we spoke about a component failing, and the customer will be asked to contact you. But you as an IEPA should also consider contacting the customer to reschedule that assessment for a different date. So can you talk us through how to do that?
Yeah, so if you remember on the, just maybe I need to come off this dashboard and log in as an IEPA. Bear with me. By an IEPA, I mean Frank. Good old Frank. Okay, so I'm going to go to assessment and assessment progress, just so I can. Okay, so the in progress again built by status, and this is the apprentice here, and it was the practical observation.
I think that's what we failed. Yes.
That's what we failed. So I'm just going to double check. Just click edit results.
Yes.
Okay, so it's a fail, and we did reschedule EPA the 25th of the 1st. So we rescheduled that component, which by looking at your calendar, I'll go back to assessment progress. Okay. I've gone back to your main dashboard. The date that it was originally planned for the retake, so the 23rd, was it? Okay, so I'm just going to go back and just double check again. So assessment progress, change the in progress to filter by status, apprentice 23. This was the element that had failed.
Can I ask a question? Will it allow you to reschedule?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
even if it hasn't been QA.
You can reschedule it if it hasn't. As long as it hasn't been
You can
QA.
reschedule it, but can you actually program it? That's what. As it go in as a LEPA and release the result, you just QA that result, release it. What I don't know is whether. So at that point, I think I'm just we're struggling a bit with the QA system because it's not behaving as we want it to. So, but basically, if the candidate fails to enter results, so this particular result will go to the LEPA for QA, and Libby showed you initially what that would look like for the leaper. The leaper would go in, they would get access to the materials, and they would have the opportunity to confirm and release that result. If they release that result, if they're happy with it, the result will go out for the learner. And if the result goes out for the learner, then that will give the IEPA the opportunity to then reschedule a reset assessment. So if you remember that initial assessment planning screen where you drop the dates of the components in the calendar, it will allow you to do the same thing. I'm just checking to see whether we've got some screenshots that will help with that. So if you can see here, this particular screenshot will show that that particular component there has been confirmed as a fail by the IEPA. So Florence Nightingale was the name of the apprentice. They had 3 components, and one of the components failed. Now the IEPA put in the original result as a fail. That then went to the LEPA to sign off, and as soon as that result went out, if you look, it then gives the IEPA the opportunity to book a retake. And that booking a retake will then take you back to the assessment planning screen, which will enable you to set a new assessment date for that particular apprentice. Okay, so we can't show you that, but what we'll do is we'll put together, as I said, the bite-sized videos, and if necessary, we can invite you to, we've got some subsequent system training this week and next week, and if necessary, we can invite you to that. So once the system is working as expected, we can talk you through this process. It is very simple, but it's not been helped by the fact that the system's not quite doing what we wanted to do today. Okay, I'm going to stop there. There's quite a lot of information. It hasn't really worked as we wanted to, but are there any immediate questions to what we've shown you so far? Any hands up? Okay, all right, I'm going to take that as a good sign, or maybe we've stunned you all into silence. Okay, at this point, I think it would be useful if we show you how you enter an overall result for a particular assessment. I'm saying it would be useful. I don't know if it will work, but let's try. So if you remember, for a particular endpoint assessment, for your assessment, there are 3 components. I've got a question. The results for Evolve will, I think it will come together when we have a try. Thank you, Palou. Louise has said very kindly said, I think it will come together when we have a try. Thank you, Louise. That's very helpful. It's like all of these things. You can rehearse it, but if the system doesn't quite do what you want to do, it's a bit of a challenge. So if you remember, we talked about different components for your particular assessment. There are 3. There is the Evolve test, there is the presentation, and the interview. So once the apprentice has passed all 3 components, then it's a case of deriving the overall outcome for that endpoint assessment. Now, what we'd like you to do at this point, or what we try to show you, is how you do that as an IEPA. That's something we can try and talk through, Libby.
Okay, so at this point, again, we will go under the assessment path, and we will go to certification.
So this is where all of the components have completed their assessments, and they've all been signed off by the LEPA.
So you're going to in progress again, filter by status. Okay, so I've got non-waiting that I can progress. As you will see, these ones here have already been certified. But what will happen here, if I click onto it, again, it will show you the same screen as you previously done when you were resulting each component. And then it will ask you to verify certification.
Okay, so if we go to the deck, what you will have is you will go into that apprentice, and you can see from the screenshot, it will give you the option to input a result. What I don't know is what it shows you. But again, the results, I'm not sure if you can see this on the screen. I'm going to make it a bit bigger because that's a bit easier to see. It will give you the option to choose one of the results for that particular overall assessment. Now, remember that, as we said this morning, the overall result is a case of bringing together the component results. And for each standard, yours included, there is a way of doing that, and there's usually some kind of grading calculator or grading form. So you complete the grading form in the normal way. You would select the outcome from the list there, and you would put the outcome there. There is then the option to upload a document, and the upload of the document will be the grading form where you calculate the overall result. And you upload that document in the same way that you upload other information. You get your chance to upload it, you pull it from your documents on your PC, you give it a name, which would be grading form, and once you've submitted that, that will then be accessible by the LEPA. So the overall results as well as the grading document will be accessible by the LEPA. And they will be able to check that and QA that online. That's the process, although we can't show you step by step. Okay, I'm going to pause again. We haven't been able to show you. I've talked you through it. Are there any questions, immediate questions at this point, given that I know there's a bit more input that we need to give you at this point? Okay, any hands up? No. Okay. At that point, let's move on. So, let's make this a little bit smaller. We've spoken about the LEPA, the quality assurance. We're doing LEPA training later in the month, but as I said, so I'm not going to go through this now. As I said, the LEPA will have the opportunity to look at the results, look at the assessment material, look at the failed feedback form if required, and give feedback to the IEPA offline, and then the IEPA will then amend that as needed, and that is part of the quality assurance steps. We'll talk about that in the LEPA training. And the same with the overall decision. The LEPA will also have the opportunity to look at the grading form, to sign that off, and they then make sure they issue the results or they confirm the results. And as soon as they've confirmed that result on EPA Pro, it goes out to the customer. And it says here, so the overall EPA decision, once every component that makes up the full apprentice has been completed and passed, the final process can begin. And it says here that once you publish that result, there is a message which reminds you that publishing it goes immediately out to the customer. There are no longer a number of stages that happen internally, so it's really important that you need to be happy with that final result before you issue it. Okay, so is there anything else with the system, Libby, that you wanted to show? Anything?
I just want to highlight the notifications bar. I know it's on the deck slide, but again, it's your notification. As I say, the aesthetics of the dashboard have changed over probably the last 4 weeks, to be honest with you, and it's ever much evolving on a week-by-week case. But prior to the new platform that you're seeing today, we had notifications that were on your main dashboard, and this has moved. So I say, if you just click on that there, it will give you all your notifications. So you can see that you'll get one that says the apprentice has been assigned to. You will see stuff like the apprentice has completed their gateway. And it's really important that you know where these are located. You can mark as red, you can delete or red. Clicking onto them, it will take you down to the new apprentices awaiting acceptance. So it's a really good tool for you to use, and you obviously can see your messages from an allocation point of view. I think that's pretty much it.
Can I go back into the notifications in a minute? Just have a view. Just query on this. Thank you to
The relevant section within CAD.
So the notification, if you click on the notification of what it is, once you click on it, it takes you to the relevant section for the next step, which is very useful, I think. Okay, so at that point, I think that is all we can show you today in terms of the system, and I'm very mindful of the fact that we haven't done all the that I wanted to do today. So we will need to reschedule either by a recorded webinar or for you to join one of the other sessions that are happening. So apologies for that. But at this stage, from what you've seen, are there any questions at this point or any things you wanted to raise? Okay, so we haven't got any hands up. So at that point, just to conclude the training with the last few slides, really. So in terms of beta contact, it's really just to remind you of the contact points through beta. Now we will update this as soon as these are confirmed, but what we've got on here are the different teams that you need to contact for each of the queries that you have. We'll make sure that this is all encompassing, so where we've got different queries, we'll make sure we identify very clearly which team you need to contact. And also, we will put the customer services contact on there, because as Sylvia raised, one of the concerns or one of the risks that we're concerned about is that that the customer will try to ask you questions that you shouldn't be answering. So it's really important that you have a clear channel to just filter those queries. We will be very clear to the customer of your role, and we would like you to be clear as well. So if they are starting to ask you questions which are not appropriate, we just channel them through the customer services channel, the email and the phone number. I've got a couple of questions. What was the date for the beta commencing? It's from Julie. Okay, Julie, so the go live in theory for beta is the 27th of January. We've got quite a bit of work to do before then, with the customer, with the platform, setting things up, but the planned go live is the 27th. Now what that actually means is that we can and the customer can start using it at that point. That doesn't mean, however, that they will necessarily be apprentices to take through the process. As you know, it's quite difficult to predict endpoints for the apprentices and when they'll be ready to take their endpoint assessment. But we envisage, as we move through February, we will start to get one or two, possibly more, apprentices who will be ready to be allocated to an IEPA. So we've got a number of weeks to go through yet when we'll get the support materials, additional training in place before things start to ramp up. The beta is still very small scale, so we're not expecting huge volumes. And we've got a number of IEPAs that we've identified as being part of this. So we don't expect that many of all of you will necessarily have large volumes on EPA Pro, but we're hoping that a wide enough range of people will have 3 or 4, maybe 1 or 2 allocations across the standard. If that answers your question, good. If not, please raise your hand, Julie. Any other questions from anybody else at this point? Okay, thank you. You're most welcome. Okay. Right. So we'll confirm the contact details. Really, at this point, it is the case of what's next. So, as I've said, given how the training's gone today, we know you will need additional training on EPA Pro and you will need some support materials on it. But hopefully what you've seen is the system is quite intuitive. It is basic, it isn't a very complicated system, and it's quite user-friendly for the customer and also for the IEPA. So we don't envisage there will be huge problems getting familiar with it, but it is new, so it's important that you get sufficient training and support as you go through it. There'll be video guides. We will update the email templates that will be needed to support the process, and we will put the training materials somewhere that's accessible, and eventually it will be on the EPA Pro platform, so you'll be able to access that training material immediately as you need it. We are booking LEPA training for the end of January. There are some specific things that we wanted to go through with our LEPAs about how they manage the workflow of their endpoint assessors, and that itself will be a reasonably short, but it will be a webinar that we put together for the end of January. So that will be one of the steps for the 3 LEPAs I think that are on online, just to make you aware of that. I have a question. Do we have dates for the LEPA training? Louise? Yes, absolutely. As far as I know, it was being set up end of last week. If you haven't had the dates for that, let me chase that today, and we will get those dates confirmed as soon as possible. And obviously, you know, if we have to do more than one session, we will do. Ideally, we get everybody together, but I will chase that set up today. So thank you for that. Just write that down. Yes, active. Okay. Sorry, just going forward. Right, Lupa training then, we'll confirm the dates as soon as possible. Beta go live 27th of January, and allocation will post after that point. But the allocation will really depend on how the customers start to register the candidates. We're really not, I think for business admin, we're not expecting any candidates at all through February. I think there might be 1 or 2, and also into early March. So we do have a kind of slower rollout, I think, for this standard than the others, but we'll confirm that and said it will be, it's not going to be big bang on the 27th of January, so we will have some time to take it on. And then the assessments will take place using EPA Pro. And as I've said, we're very keen that, you know, following the training, the complete training that you receive, and also through the beta phase, that you will have the opportunity to give us some feedback and to answer some questions about how it's gone, you know, to answer some of the points and concerns that you've raised. The beta phase is about learning for all of the different stakeholders, for us as City and Guilds, for the customers, and also for the IEPAs, with a view to informing how we improve the processes and refine them going forward as we start to roll out at a larger scale. So that's really important, and we'd appreciate any feedback that you want to give us through that phase. Okay, so that really concludes what I was going to talk through today. This morning. I'm sorry that the training on the system didn't work as well as we'd hoped. Apologies for that. Before we finish, are there any questions or any points that anybody wanted to raise to the group? Okay. I'm going to take that as a positive sign, although it might not be. Oh, you've got one question. Great. Thank you, Sylvia, and thank you for your feedback. So Libby's just saying that she's just said thank you, and that it looks informative and fairly easy to use. We're hoping that's the case, Sylvia, but I think you know, you'd benefit from some more support and training material to show you that, to prove that really. So thank you for that. Thank you. If there are no more questions, just give it 1 second, just in case. If there are no more questions, just to say thank you so much. I know this has been a mammoth day, slightly shorter than we hoped, which is great. We will be in touch again. So thank you for the attention. I know it's a struggle online, but hopefully it's given you a clear insight into the processes and at least a taster of the system. So thank you very much for your attention, and have a nice evening.